The day started like any other in King's Landing, with the smell of dust and roses in the air, and the sound of gold cloaks marching in the background. But for Lord Eddard Stark, Hand of the King, there was a weight in his chest he couldn't ignore. Something was wrong. The court had grown tense, and whispers filled the halls like smoke. The Lannisters were moving too quietly, and silence was never a good sign. King Robert Baratheon had grown careless. He drank too much, hunted too often, and ignored the warnings Ned tried to give him. But still, Ned remained loyal, as he always had, because Robert was his oldest friend, the man he called brother. And now that brother was in danger, even if he didn't see it, it started with a feast. A celebration for no clear reason, thrown by Queen Cersei. That alone had Ned on edge. The Queen was smiling too much, and Jaime Lannister never let his hand leave the hilt of his sword. Ned's instincts screamed at him to leave with his daughters and go back to Winterfell, but it was too late. The trap had already been set that night. When Robert was deep in his cups and laughing with a roast turkey in hand, Lannister guards filled the hall. Not the city watch, not the king's own men, but golden lions with hard faces and silent steps. They moved like shadows through the crowd, and no one noticed until it was too late. Cersei stood up, her voice calm but cold. "My lord husband," she said sweetly, "you've ruled long enough. It's time someone more capable takes over." Robert stared at her, confused. "What in the seven hells are you saying, woman?" "I'm saying this is the end," she said. "The end of your reign, and your friends meddling." The moment she said that, Jaime stepped forward with his sword drawn. The guards surrounded Robert at once, but before they could strike, Ned was already on his feet, sword drawn, standing between Robert and the Lannisters. "You'll have to go through me first," Ned growled. Jaime smirked. "I was hoping you'd say that." The fight broke out in an instant. Steel clashed with steel, and screams echoed through the great hall. The nobles ran for cover, but Ned stood his ground, cutting down one lion after another, protecting his king with everything he had. Robert, still drunk but slowly sobering, managed to grab a sword and joined the fight, though his movements were sluggish. Ned fought like a wolf cornered, his eyes never leaving Robert's back. He knew what was coming. He'd seen it in Cersei's eyes. Then came the moment. Jaime charged with a killing blow meant for Robert, but Ned stepped in its path. The blade cut deep, too deep. Ned staggered, blood pouring from his side, but he didn't fall. He kept fighting. For Robert. For his daughters. For honor. Another blow came, this time from behind. A dagger. He turned to see Cersei herself, holding the bloody blade, eyes cold as ice. Ned collapsed to his knees, his breath shallow. Robert roared like a wounded bear and drove his sword through the chest of the Lannister closest to Ned, but it was too late. Ned looked up at his friend, a sad smile on his face. "Protect them, Robert," he whispered. "Your children. My girls in Winterfell." Then he was gone. The hall went silent for a breath. Robert stood frozen, covered in blood, staring at the man who had once been his brother in arms. The man who had saved his life. A storm was coming, and Robert Baratheon had just lost his only shield against it. Robert Baratheon stood in the middle of the blood-soaked hall, his knuckles white from gripping his sword too tightly. Ned Stark's body lay crumpled at his feet, still, cold and bleeding. The smell of iron filled the air. Around them, a few of the Lannister guards remained standing, but none dared move. Not after the look Robert gave them. He looked like a man who had just awakened from a long, drunken dream, only to find everything he loved shattered. "You killed him," Robert said quietly, his eyes locked on Cersei. "You killed him." Cersei, never one to flinch, stepped forward slowly, dabbing a speck of blood from her hand with a silk cloth.
"He was in the way, Robert."
"You were too blind to see how weak you've become. He would have dragged you down with him." Robert roared and charged. Cersei didn't even scream. Jaime stepped in, blocking Robert's blow with a crash of steel. "You want to die too?" Jaime hissed, struggling against the weight of Robert's wild swings. "I want you all dead." Robert barked, eyes full of rage and pain. "You touched him. You betrayed my crown." The hall exploded in chaos once again. But this time, Robert was not the confused, drunken king. He fought like the Robert of old, the warrior who smashed Rhaegar at the trident, the man who won a kingdom with a war hammer in his hand. Jaime barely kept up, sweat pouring down his face, each blow sending sparks flying. Cersei screamed for the guards to step in, but Robert's fury was like fire. He smashed one in the face, breaking teeth and bone, then slammed the other's chest with his boot, but rage can only carry a man so far. Robert stumbled. Too much wine. Too many years of soft living. Jaime saw the opening and kicked Robert hard in the stomach, sending him crashing into a table. The king groaned, struggling to rise. "Don't," Jaime warned, sword raised. "I'll kill you." Robert's lip bled as he tried to stand, gripping the edge of the table. "Do it," he spat. "Go ahead." "You already killed the better man." Cersei stepped forward now, her eyes shining. "We don't need him dead," she said. "Not yet. Let him live long enough to sign the throne over to Joffrey." Then accidents happen. Jaime hesitated. He wasn't a man without guilt, and something in him twisted at the thought. Killing Robert felt wrong, but his love for Cersei was stronger than his honor. Robert didn't resist. He laughed bitterly. "So this is it. You stab me with smiles. You betray me with kisses. You murder my friend in front of me and still talk of thrones." "No," said Cersei coldly. "We talk of survival. The realm needs stability, Robert. You're too unstable. You're a drunk, a broken king. Your death would only speed the peace." That word, peace, made Robert's stomach turn. He was dragged to the dungeons, bruised and broken. They didn't kill him, not yet. That would come later. For now, Cersei needed to make it look legal. She'd announce he was sick, that he'd been injured on a hunt again. The realm would believe it. They always did, but word of Ned Stark's death spread fast. In the north, the ravens flew to Winterfell. Catelyn screamed when she read the letter. Sansa collapsed in her room. Arya, already sensing something had gone wrong, ran away from the castle guards, vanishing into the streets of King's Landing with only Needle by her side. Robb Stark, now barely a man, stood in Winterfell's hall and read the letter again and again, his hand shaking. His father was dead, killed in the capital while protecting a king who hadn't earned that loyalty. Robb's jaw clenched. His eyes darkened. He called the banners. In the Riverlands, Catelyn rode south, demanding answers. In the Vale, Lisa refused to move, but rumors spread that Littlefinger had played a role in it all. In the Westerlands, Tywin Lannister prepared his own moves, not knowing his children had acted too quickly and too publicly. The realm didn't find peace after Ned Stark's death. It cracked wide open. And Robert Baratheon, once king of the Seven Kingdoms, sat in a dark cell, whispering his friend's name through bloody lips. "Ned, I'm sorry." The dungeons beneath the Red Keep were colder than Robert remembered. Damp stone walls surrounded him. Rats squeaked in the corners. The smell of mold, piss, and hopelessness filled every breath. He sat on a thin slab of stone, wrists chained, beard growing wild. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Ned falling, blood pouring from his side, his voice a fading whisper. It haunted him worse than any war memory. He had once ruled a kingdom. Now he was forgotten, a prisoner in his own castle, but Robert wasn't dead yet. And as long as he breathed, he swore he would make Cersei pay. Above him, the Red Keep played a different song. Cersei walked the halls with a proud smile, spinning the tale she'd crafted with perfect care. "The king is gravely ill," she told the court. "He suffered a terrible wound in a hunting accident. The maesters are doing all they can." And Joffrey, her monstrous son, sat on the Iron Throne as Prince Regent, his smug face staring down nobles twice his age, ordering executions like they were child's games. But not everyone believed the lie. Varys, the spider, knew the truth. He always did. And though he played the game carefully, he began to spread whispers, quiet truths in the ears of those who mattered. That Ned Stark had been murdered, that Robert Baratheon was being held, that the Lannisters were tightening their grip like a golden serpent. Meanwhile, in the north, Robb Stark's war had already begun. Winterfell's banners flew over the green fields of the Riverlands as the young wolf gathered his allies. The Karstarks, the Umbers, the Mormonts, all of them came, Men followed him not just out of loyalty, but because they saw in him the fire of Ned Stark. Robb wasn't like his father in every way. He was younger, sharper, and angry. His grief burned like a sword fresh from the forge. He didn't want peace. He wanted revenge. When the first Lannister scout was caught crossing the Trident, Robb sent him back with no hands. "Tell Tywin," he said coldly. "Winterfell remembers." Catelyn arrived at River Unbroken, her eyes red and voice low. Her father was dying, her husband was dead, and her daughters were lost in the capital. Yet she stood beside her son like a shadow of steel. "Don't let grief make you foolish," she warned Robb. "You're not just fighting for vengeance. You're fighting for the North, for justice, for our family." "I know," Robb said, "but I will have their heads." Back in King's Landing, Arya was hiding in plain sight. She had cut her hair short, stolen a boy's tunic, and vanished into the filth of Flea Bottom. Every day she grew harder, colder. She watched Lannister guards with hungry eyes, gripping needle in the dark, whispering names before sleep. Cersei, Joffrey, Jaime, the Mountain. The list grew longer each night. Sansa, however, was a prisoner in a golden cage. She was still in the Red Keep, forced to smile and kneel and pretend her father had been bravely lost during the king's accident. She cried at night, her dreams filled with screams. And Joffrey, twisted, cruel Joffrey, liked to watch her suffer. He made her sit beside him at court, paraded her like a trophy. "Soon you'll be queen," he would say, "and you'll thank me for it." Sansa didn't believe him. "Not anymore." Something inside her had changed the moment she heard her father was dead. She no longer dreamed of songs and knights. She dreamed of escape, or murder. Far to the west, Tywin Lannister had finally heard the truth. His jaw clenched as he read the Raven's message. His children had moved too soon, acted without his word. Now the North was rising and the king was not dead. That was dangerous. A living king, even in chains, was a weapon if found by the wrong hands. He called for war. "Send word to Jaime," he told his bannermen. "The wolf marches. We will answer with fire and gold." But what Tywin didn't know, what no one knew, was that Varys had already made his move. Late one night, in the black silence of the dungeons, the spider came to Robert's cell. His steps made no sound. His voice was a whisper. "Your Grace," he said, unlocking the chains. "It's time." Robert blinked. "Why would you help me?" Varys smiled faintly. "Because chaos is a ladder. But even I don't like lions who kill wolves." Robert stood, weak but breathing fire. "Then let's burn their den." Robert Baratheon had never felt so alive. His muscles ached. His back screamed from weeks chained in the dark. But the moment he stepped out of the dungeons, breathing the cold air of freedom, he felt something stir in him, something old. The warrior, the king, the Robert who had once led rebellions and crushed armies. He followed Varys, silently through the secret tunnels beneath the Red Keep. Torchlight danced along the narrow walls as they passed old stones. No one had touched in years. "Where are we going?" Robert asked, his voice hoarse. "There is a ship in Blackwater Bay," Varys whispered. "Hidden and loyal." "We sail to Dragonstone. You still have friends there," Robert grunted. "Stannis?" Varys hesitated. "He's not warm, but he is loyal. And he hates the Lannisters more than he hates you." "That should be enough." They moved quickly through the shadows. Outside, the city still slept, unaware that the true king walked beneath their feet. But it wouldn't be long before Cersei noticed he was missing. Meanwhile, inside the Red Keep, chaos had already begun. When the guards came to deliver food to Robert's cell and found nothing but broken chains, the alarm was raised. Cersei's calm shattered. Her face twisted with rage as she screamed at her captains. "Find him," she shouted. "Lock the gates! Search every whorehouse and wine cellar." He could destroy everything, but it was too late. By dawn, Robert was already far from the capital, sailing through the mist on a fast black ship with a golden antler painted beneath the deck. He stood at the helm, staring back at the city he once ruled, a storm building behind his eyes. "They think I'm finished," he muttered. "They don't know me." At Dragonstone, Stannis Baratheon stood at the edge of a cliff, staring at the sea with his usual cold expression. His jaw clenched when he saw the ship approaching. When Robert stepped onto the shore, bruised, dirty, but standing tall, Stannis didn't smile. But he nodded. "I thought you were dead." "Not yet," Robert said. "But I might be soon if we don't move fast." "You lost the throne," Stannis said. "You let Lannisters run the realm like a brothel. Why should I help you?" Robert didn't argue. He just looked his brother in the eyes. "Because our brother is dead. Because they killed Ned Stark. Because Joffrey's sitting on my throne. And because if we don't fight back now, you'll be next." That was enough for Stannis. His pride burned as strong as his hatred. "Then we raise our banners for House Baratheon." As ravens flew from Dragonstone across the narrow sea, the north prepared to strike. Robb Stark had crossed the neck and was marching south, an army of 30,000 behind him. Catelyn rode beside him now, no longer just a grieving widow, but a quiet commander, her words full of wisdom, her eyes watching every movement. One night, under the stars, Robb gathered his men. "We fight not just for my father," he said, "but for the realm. They think they can murder honor and sit smiling on the throne. We'll show them what wolves do when cornered." The men roared. War drums beat, banners flew, and across the riverlands, the name Stark began to stir fear in the Lannister heart. But inside the Red Keep, Cersei was preparing her own war. She sat beside Joffrey in the throne room, whispering lies into his ear, filling his mind with hatred. "Robert has betrayed us," she said. "The North rebels. You are the true king now. You must rule with strength," Joffrey grinned. "Let them come. I'll have all their heads, even the girls." Sansa flinched at his words, but kept her face still. She was learning now, learning how to lie, how to survive. But deep inside, something sharp was growing. Not hate, not yet, but something cold. Arya, still lost in the streets, found herself among a group of traveling actors, masks, plays, and lies. She became no one. She watched. She learned. And she waited, and somewhere in the dark alleys of King's Landing a new whisper rose. "Robert is alive." The small folk heard it first. Then the gold cloaks. Then the merchants. The city was not loyal to Robert anymore, but fear still lived in their bones. They remembered the hammer. They remembered the rebellion. If he returned, and if the wolves came with him, things would burn. And in the east, across the sea, a girl with silver hair stood in the sands of a strange land, holding dragon eggs close to her chest. Her time had not yet come, but the world was changing. The game had shifted, and Robert Baratheon was coming back for his throne, with vengeance in his heart and a war in his wake. The banners of House Stark fluttered in the wind, grey direwolves snarling on white cloth. Robb Stark rode at the head of his army, his face young but his eyes hardened. They had crossed the Green Fork and taken Moat Cailin without resistance. The northern lords followed him with pride, calling him the Young Wolf, though none of them missed the fact that Robb didn't smile anymore. He barely spoke. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw his father's body on the cold floor of the Red Keep, and every time he opened them, he remembered that the Lannisters were still laughing in their golden cages. Now it was time to end that laughter. The first real blood spilled at the Battle of the Twins. Lord Walder Frey, slippery and suspicious, had demanded much, his daughter's hand in marriage, alliances, promises. But Catelyn Stark, sharp with grief and politics, handled him with careful words. In the end, Frey let them pass, not because he cared, but because he feared what would happen if the Starks won without him, and Robb won. They struck Jaime Lannister's forces in the west like a hammer. Grey Wind, Robb's direwolf, tore through the battlefield with savage grace. The Lannister lines shattered under the northern charge. Steel clashed, arrows flew, and the Golden Lions bled red in the mud. When the dust cleared, over 2,000 Lannister men lay dead or captured, including Jaime himself. Robb didn't celebrate. He walked among the wounded in silence. Then he stood over Jaime, who sat in chains, still smug. "Your father will come for you," Jaime said. Robb stared at him coldly. "Let him. News of Jaime's capture sent shockwaves through the realm. Tywin Lannister slammed his fist against the map table at Harrenhal, knocking cups and candles flying. His golden eyes narrowed. "He's just a boy," Tywin growled. "And he's already undone years of power." He turned to his advisors. "Double the supply lines. Cut the Riverlands in half. Crush them before they get to King's Landing." But his words came too late. In the capital, the people were restless. The rumors about Robert's escape had grown into wildfire. Some whispered that the true king was already marching with the North. Others said he had died, only to rise again like a shadow of vengeance. Cersei paced the throne room like a lioness in a cage. Her grip on the city was slipping. Lords questioned her. Goldcloaks murmured. And worst of all, her son was enjoying the chaos. Joffrey had ordered more executions, servants, messengers, even a nobleman who dared mention Robb Stark's name in court. Heads rolled in the square daily. The people watched with wide, angry eyes. Sansa Stark saw it all. She sat beside Joffrey like a doll carved from ice, her hands folded, her face blank. But inside her, a storm raged. Each death made her colder. Each scream made her stronger. She had no sword like Arya, no wolf like Robb. But she had learned how to wear a mask. And masks, she realized, could be just as sharp as blades. Then one morning, Varys came to her chambers. He moved like a shadow, his bald head shining in the candlelight. "My lady," he said softly, "would you like to go home?" Sansa stared at him. "Is that a trick?" "No," he replied. "It's a choice, but a dangerous one." She nodded once. "I've lived in danger long enough." In the east, word finally reached Dragonstone. Jaime had been captured. Stannis Baratheon read the letter in silence, then tossed it into the fire. Robert grunted. "We should move," Stannis agreed. "I'll lead the fleet. You rally the Storm Lords. We strike from both land and sea." Robert placed his hand on his brother's shoulder, awkward but sincere. "Let's take back our home." And so the banners of Baratheon were raised again, not just the crowned stag of Robert, but the fiery heart of Stannis too. Ships, filled with soldiers, left Dragonstone like a swarm of wasps, cutting across Blackwater Bay, and behind them ravens flew, carrying words that would shake the realm. "The king lives, the war now." Had 2 wolves and 2 stags. Tywin Lannister read the message and knew what it meant. The game had changed. Honor had been stabbed in the heart. But it did not die. It marched, it sailed, it howled in the north and roared from the sea, and it would not stop. Until the Iron Throne burned. The Blackwater Bay was darker than usual. The moon hid behind the clouds, as if even the sky didn't want to witness what was coming. Robert Baratheon stood at the prow of the lead ship, the salty wind whipping through his hair. Behind him, 20 war galleys carried loyal men, Storm Lords, Dragonstone soldiers, and those who remembered the rebellion he once led. Stannis sailed beside him on a smaller, more rigid ship, dressed in black and red, his face cold as iron. "We strike before dawn," Robert said, his voice hard. "The city isn't expecting this," Stannis nodded. "We go for the Red Keep, no speeches." "No mercy." Robert looked back at the glowing shape of King's Landing in the distance. "I'll kill her myself," he muttered. "For Ned, for the realm." At the same time, inside the capital, the Red Keep was in panic. News had reached the city by Raven just hours earlier. Robert Baratheon was alive, and his fleet was at sea. Cersei's face was pale as she paced in her chambers, her wine untouched. "They're lying," she whispered to herself. "It's a trick. Robert is dead. He has to be." But the fear in her heart wouldn't go away. Maester Pycelle shuffled in behind her, mumbling, "The people in Flea Bottom have begun to chant his name. They believe he's returned." Cersei spun. "Then silence them. Kill anyone who spreads it. Tear out their tongues if you must." But fear doesn't die with blades. It spreads faster. The gold cloaks, once loyal to the Queen, had begun to mutter. Their captains didn't trust Joffrey's orders anymore. Some remembered Robert's rule. Others remembered Ned Stark's execution and felt the shame still burning in their armor. In the shadows of the castle, Varys moved like a ghost. He had already prepared the path for Robert's return, loyal servants, hidden keys, and secrets buried under stone. He whispered to the right ears and bribed the right hands, and then, just before dawn, it began. The fleet struck like thunder. Baratheon ships smashed into the harbor. Siege ladders were thrown over the walls. Loyalists inside the city opened the gates for Robert's men. The guards that resisted were cut down without mercy. From the north gate, another force poured in, Robb Stark's men, joined by soldiers from the Riverlands and the Vale. Arya had sent a message through Varys, smuggled by a kind-faced actor, telling her brother that the time was now. Inside the city, chaos exploded, fires rose. Bells rang. People screamed in the streets as swords clashed in alleyways. Gold cloaks dropped their weapons, some joining Robert's men, others fleeing for their lives. The city was tired of hunger, fear, and Joffrey's madness. In the Red Keep, Cersei stood in the throne room, Joffrey at her side, red-faced and screeching. "I'll have their heads," he screamed. "I'm the king." "No," said a voice behind him. Sansa Stark stepped forward slowly, no longer dressed like a lady, but in dark, simple clothes. Her eyes were cold, her voice calm. "You're a coward. And your reign ends tonight," Cersei snarled, grabbing a dagger from the table. "You little—" Before she could strike, the door burst open. Robert Baratheon strode in, bloody but alive, his hammer in hand and fire in his eyes. Cersei froze. Joffrey's mouth fell open. Sansa stepped aside, letting the storm through. "You," Robert said, pointing the hammer straight at his queen. "You murdered my friend. You locked me in a dungeon. You turned my throne into a brothel for power." Cersei tried to smile, but her face trembled. "I did what I had to." She never finished. Robert's hammer crushed the table beside her with a thunderous blow. Joffrey ran, but not far. Arya appeared at the far end of the room, sword drawn, needle. Her face was dirt-streaked and wild, but her aim was steady. She didn't kill him, not yet. She just blocked the door. "You're not going anywhere," she said. Joffrey whimpered, backing into the wall. Guards poured in behind Robert, Stannis, Renly, Davos, and even Varys. The war was ending. Robb Stark arrived minutes later, soaked in blood and dust. He stood beside Robert in the throne room, staring at the boy king and the woman who had broken his family. Robert looked at them all, the living, the bleeding, the silent ghosts in the hall. Then he sat down. "Not on the Iron Throne, but beside it. I'm not the same man," he said quietly. "Let's rebuild this realm, not for crowns, for the people." And for once no one argued, but outside in the ashes of the city other eyes watched. Others waited, because while the lions were falling and the stags were rising, the dragons were still coming. The Iron Throne stood untouched for hours. Robert Baratheon hadn't sat on it since he took back the Red Keep. He'd walked into the throne room, soaked in blood, with the ghosts of rebellion behind him, and yet, when he looked at that twisted seat of melted blades, he felt no desire for it. He left it cold. Instead, Robert ruled from a wooden chair in the war room. Maps spread before him, a goblet in hand, not wine, just water now. He was tired. He had bled for the realm twice, and though he wore the crown again, it felt heavier than ever. The city was quiet, but not calm. King's Landing had survived the storm, but it hadn't escaped the damage. Fires still smoldered in Flea Bottom. Burned homes, broken stalls, and bodies lined the alleys. The common folk were restless, unsure if the new king would be any better than the last. Robert tried, but he wasn't made for rebuilding. He was a warrior king, not a ruler of peace. So he leaned on others, Stannis to command the law, Davos to calm the streets, and even Varys, whose whisper net now worked to spread a new story. The true king has returned to bring justice. Sansa was moved to safer quarters in Maegor's holdfast. Her engagement to Joffrey was quietly erased, her name cleared of treason. Yet she did not smile. She spent her days in the gardens, quiet, thoughtful, watching the skies as if expecting something. Arya, however, refused to stay in the castle. She vanished from her room days after the battle, last seen near the docks. Some said she went north. Others claimed she followed a faceless man she had once met. Robert didn't stop her. She wasn't a little girl anymore. She was something else entirely. Joffrey was dead, not by Robert's hand, nor Arya's. It was Robb Stark who ended him. After the battle, Joffrey had been taken prisoner, locked in a cold cell. Robb had visited him once. No guards, no sword, just silence. And when the door opened again, Joffrey was hanging from the ceiling, a belt around his neck. Suicide, the maesters said. But no one believed it. Cersei's fate was far worse. She was kept under watch in the black cells. No trial, no visitors. Robert couldn't bring himself to kill her, not yet. Some wounds fester before they close. But the war wasn't truly over, because across the narrow sea, the last dragon had taken flight. Daenerys Targaryen stood in the sands of Essos, staring into the sky as the first of her 3 dragons, Drogon, screamed into the wind. Black wings stretching wide, she had grown stronger. No longer the frightened girl traded for an army. No longer the soft wife of a dead Khal. She was Khaleesi now. And Queen, when the news reached her, Robert Baratheon is alive and he has retaken King's Landing, she didn't weep. She didn't rage. She simply looked at her dragons and whispered, "Then we take it back." Her advisors, Ser Jorah, a few loyal blood riders, and new followers who believed in her fire, warned her of Robert's strength. He has the North now. The Riverlands, the Vale, even his brothers. But Daenerys shook her head. The people of Westeros have followed wolves and stags long enough. Let them see what fire looks like. She began gathering ships. She offered freedom to slaves in return for swords. She promised gold to sell swords if they bent the knee. Her words spread from city to city like flame on dry leaves. A girl with dragons, a queen with blood older than Baratheon's. Lannisters or Starks, a storm was coming. Not of swords or betrayal, but of fire. Back in Westeros, word of Daenerys' rise reached the war room within weeks. Robert read the letter twice. "Another Targaryen," he muttered. "She's not a child anymore," said Stannis, frowning. "She's building an army. She has dragons," Davos added. "Real ones." Robert slammed the letter down. "Then we burn them before they burn us." But Robb Stark disagreed. He stood tall now, no longer just the young wolf, but the Warden of the North in all but name. "The realm is tired of war," he said. "If we strike her first, the people will never forgive it. Not after what they suffered under Aerys. We need to speak with her." Robert shook his head. "You sound like your father." Robb didn't flinch. "Thank you." There was no final decision. Only silence. But in that silence another truth crept in. The realm had traded one war for another. The North still remembered. The dragons had awoken. And Robert Baratheon, returned king or not, was standing on a throne of ash and blood. Once again, the first dragon was seen just after sunrise. A black shadow passed over the narrow sea like a storm cloud with wings. It flew low over fishing villages. It screamed so sharp and terrible that people dropped to their knees, weeping or praying. A few remembered the old stories. Fewer still believed them. But when the second and third came, red and green, trailing fire behind them, the truth became impossible to deny. The dragons were real, and they were coming. Daenerys Targaryen stood at the helm of her ship as it cut through Blackwater Bay. Her silver hair blew in the wind. Her eyes were calm, focused. Behind her, a fleet of ships, dozens of them, sailed under the new banner, a red dragon breathing fire on black. Freed slaves, mercenaries, Dothraki screamers, and old knights loyal to her house filled the decks. This was no invasion. It was a return. Inside King's Landing, the Red Keep was silent. No feasts, no celebrations. Just the tension of men preparing for war they didn't want. Robert stood on the ramparts in full armor, staring at the horizon as smoke curled from dragon wings above. He didn't shake. He didn't blink. But deep inside, the king felt something he hadn't felt in years. Fear. "I killed Rhaegar," he muttered. "I broke their line." Stannis stood beside him. "You missed one." The small council gathered in the war room, now lit only by a single candle. The mood was grim. "She's outside the gates," Davos said. "She demands a parley at sunset." "Just her. A trap," growled Stannis. "A chance," said Robb. "Let me go." "No," Robert said. "This started with me. It ends with me." And so, at sunset, Robert Baratheon walked out of the Red Keep with only a handful of guards and crossed the scorched bridge to the field outside the city. There, under a white tent between two armies, stood Daenerys Targaryen, cloaked in red, her dragons circling in the skies above. The world seemed to stop. They stared at each other for a long time. "Neither spoke first. You killed my family," Daenerys said quietly. "They burned the realm," Robert replied. "My father was mad," she said. "But my brother died on your hammer. My people were hunted like dogs, and mine were burned alive," Robert said, voice sharp. "You think fire is justice, that your dragons are mercy?" "No," she said. "But I think your throne is soaked in blood." A long silence passed between them. Finally, Robert spoke again, voice heavy with years of regret. "I don't want to fight you." "Then kneel," she said. He smiled just a little. "You sound like your brother." "I'm not Viserys," Daenerys said coldly. "I came to build, not burn. You came with dragons. I came because I had no home." They stood in silence again. Then Daenerys asked, "Would Ned Stark have wanted this war?" That hit like a blade. Robert flinched. "You think I don't carry that name like a stone?" he said. "I see him every night. I hear his voice in my sons. I see his eyes in the boy he died to protect." Daenerys lowered her head slightly. "Then let's not make his death meaningless." That night, the city waited. Both armies stood ready. Catapults were aimed. Fires were lit. One word would start it. One wrong glance would set everything to flames. But then the gates of King's Landing opened, and from them walked Robert Baratheon, not with a sword, but with a banner of truce. Behind him, the Iron Throne remained untouched, and across from him, Daenerys dismounted Drogon, her steps soft on the scorched ground. Together, they walked through the city. The people didn't cheer. They didn't weep, they watched. Two rulers, two broken heirs, one realm that had seen too much war. A council was formed. Daenerys was offered Dragonstone and a seat on the new small council. Robert remained king, but in name only. Power would be shared now, with voices from all corners of Westeros. Sansa ruled the north as warden, never again to be anyone's pawn. Robb returned to Winterfell, but left his mark on the capital. Stannis retreated to Dragonstone, bitter, but silent. Arya, gone again. Her path was no longer part of this realm, and the Iron Throne, melted by dragonfire. On Robert's own command, "It killed too many," he said. "Let it die." So it ended not with fire nor with blood, but with the last war-stained king looking at the ashes of power and deciding that maybe, just maybe, it was time for something new. And thus Ned Stark's death did not end the realm. It saved it.